Sandra could not breathe. His dark eyes were too close. His hard chest pressed against her hands, pinning her to the edge of the cheap kitchen counter. The heavy silence in the room screamed in her ears. He knew. He looked right through her dirty clothes and her messy hair, and he saw the massive lie she had built around him. If she told him the real truth, that he was a dying John Doe she bought from a crooked hospital worker, he would leave. Or worse, he would snap her neck just like he almost did to William. He had no memory, but he had the instincts of a pure killer. She had to give him a truth that made sense to his violent, empty brain. She had to weaponize the lie before it crushed her. "Fine," Sandra gasped. She pushed against his chest, her fingers digging into his warm skin. "Fine, you are right, we are not married." Nathan did not move back. He stayed right where he was, his large hand still wrapped firmly around her jaw. "Keep talking." Sandra swallowed hard. "It was a deal," she whispered, forcing her voice to stay steady. "A business deal, you and me." "A deal," he repeated. His thumb stopped rubbing her skin. "What kind of deal?" "You were hiding," she said. She looked right into his pitch-black eyes. "I found you in the alley behind this building a year ago. You were hurt. You had a knife wound on your side. You told me not to call the cops. You said bad people were looking for you." Nathan's eyes flickered. He reached down with his free hand and touched the long, jagged white scar on his ribs. The story fit the marks on his body. It fit the dark, angry feeling in his blood. "Go on," he ordered quietly. "You had a lot of cash," Sandra lied smoothly. The words poured out of her now. She was an artist painting a picture, and this was her masterpiece. "You paid my rent, you bought my food. In exchange, I let you stay here. You told me to tell the landlord and the neighbors that we were married. A poor artist and her mechanic husband. It was the perfect cover. Nobody asks questions about a boring, broke married couple." Nathan tilted his head. He looked around the tiny, messy room. He looked at the locked front door. "A hideout," he said softly. "Yes," Sandra breathed. "But I needed something from you too, my parents, you saw them. They want me to marry an old, rich creep named Henderson. They have been trying to force me to do it for 2 years to pay off their debts. I told them I eloped with you. A deadbeat mechanic. They hated it, but it kept them away. We used each other, Nathan, that was the deal." Nathan slowly let go of her jaw. He took one step back. The heavy, terrifying pressure leaving her personal space made Sandra gasp for air. She rubbed her neck, watching him closely. He walked over to the dirty window. He looked out at the rain falling on the dark Brooklyn streets. He stayed quiet for a long time. He was putting the pieces together in his empty head. He woke up in a hospital with a fake name. He had hands that knew how to choke a man to death. He had scars from bullets and knives. The story made perfect sense to him. He was a dangerous man hiding from dangerous enemies, and this small, poor, desperate woman was his cover. "The hospital," Nathan said, turning his head to look at her over his broad shoulder. "How did I end up there?" "You went out one night," Sandra said. "You said you had to handle some loose ends. You never came back. A month later, the hospital called me. You had a fake ID in your pocket with this address and the name Nathan Kim. They told me you were in a coma. I went to the hospital every single day. I kept the cover going. I told them I was your wife." "And the bad people you said you borrowed money from to pay my hospital bill?" he asked. His eyes narrowed, catching the hole in her story. "That was a lie," Sandra admitted, keeping her voice totally flat. "I sold my best paintings. I emptied my bank account. I paid the hospital cash so they would not ask questions. I was trying to protect you. I was trying to protect our deal." Nathan turned around fully. He looked at her differently now. He did not look at her like she was a piece of trash anymore. He looked at her like she was an asset, a smart, useful tool. "Where are my things?" he demanded. "The things I had in my pockets when I went to the hospital." "Under the bed," Sandra said. She walked over to her tiny mattress on the floor. She dropped to her knees and pulled out a small, clear plastic bag. It was the bag the crooked hospital worker had given her when she paid him the first time. She had never opened it. She threw the bag onto the wobbly wooden table. Nathan walked over and picked up the plastic bag. He tore it open. 3 things fell out onto the chipped wood. A heavy silver lighter, a thick black key card with no words on it, just a shiny gold computer chip, and a completely crushed, broken cell phone. Nathan picked up the lighter. He flipped it over in his large hand. It was scratched and old. He popped the top open with his thumb. The movement was fast, smooth, and perfect. A bright yellow flame shot out. He stared at the fire for a second, then snapped it shut. No wallet, no money, Nathan said. He picked up the black key card. He ran his thumb over the gold chip. Someone took my cash, someone tried to kill me. Yes, Sandra whispered. She stood by the table, crossing her arms. And if you walk out that door right now, they will probably finish the job. You have no memory. You do not even know who is hunting you. Nathan looked at the black key card. His jaw clenched tight. He hated being blind. He hated not knowing his own enemies. But he knew she was right. He was weak right now. His head pounded with a dull, constant ache. He needed a place to heal. He needed a place to plan. He dropped the key card back onto the table. He turned his dark eyes to Sandra. The deal continues, Nathan said. His voice was cold, flat, and absolute. I stay here, you keep playing the loving wife, but the rules change right now, Sandra. Sandra's heart did not slow down. What rules? I am in charge, he said. He walked around the table until he was standing right in front of her again. I do not care what our arrangement was before I lost my memory. From this second forward, you do exactly what I tell you to do. You do not talk to anyone about me. You do not bring anyone to this apartment. You belong to me until I figure out who put me in that hospital bed. I am not your slave, Sandra snapped. A sudden flash of real anger pushed past her fear. I saved your life, I paid your bills, do not talk to me like I am a dog. Nathan's eyes flared. He moved so fast she did not even see his hand come up. He grabbed the back of her neck, his thick fingers tangling in her natural hair. He pulled her forward until her chest hit his. You are not a slave, he whispered, his hot breath hitting her lips. You are my cover, and if you slip up, if you let my enemies find me before I am ready, we are both dead. Do you understand that? This is not a game anymore, wife. This is survival. Sandra stared up into his pitch-black eyes. She saw the pure, raw violence in them. She saw a man who would burn the whole city down to get what he wanted. She had wanted a shield to keep her parents away. She had found a sword instead. I understand, she whispered. He held her there for one more second. His thumb brushed against the side of her neck, right over her fast-beating pulse. Then he let her go. He stepped back and pointed at the door. Lock it, he ordered, and do not open it again. Sandra walked over and twisted the deadbolt. Her hands were still shaking, but her mind was completely clear. The lie had worked. He bought the story. He thought they were business partners hiding from the mob, but she knew the truth. She was sleeping next to a ticking bomb, and she had no idea how much time was left on the clock. Miles away, the cold New York rain hammered against the dirty window of a dark, nasty bar in Queens. The place smelled like spilled beer and cheap bleach. William sat in a sticky leather booth in the back corner. He was holding a glass of cheap whiskey with a shaking hand. He took a huge gulp, letting the burn slide down his throat. He winced and reached up with his free hand, touching the deep, dark purple bruises forming around his neck. Every time he swallowed, it felt like swallowing broken glass. That giant bastard in Sandra's apartment had almost crushed his windpipe. William's chest heaved with angry, ragged breaths. He was going to kill him. He was going to find a pipe, go back to that shithole building, and beat that guy's brains in. But as William sat there, staring at his half-empty glass, a memory flashed in his mind. When the giant grabbed him by the throat, the sleeve of his cheap grey hoodie had pulled back. William had been fighting for his life, kicking and scratching, but his eyes had locked onto the man's forearm. There was a massive, dark tattoo covering the skin, a black dragon twisting around dark clouds. William froze. He put his whiskey glass down on the sticky table. He knew that tattoo. William dug his hand into the pocket of his wet leather jacket. He pulled out his cracked cell phone. He opened his photo gallery and scrolled back through months of pictures. He stopped on a screenshot he had taken from a secret family email. It was a picture of a man, a very rich, very dangerous man. The email said this man was missing. The email said whoever found this man would get a massive, life-changing reward. William zoomed in on the picture. The man in the photo was wearing a custom, expensive black suit. He had short, perfectly styled dark hair, and on his left wrist, poking out from under his expensive white shirt cuff, was the tail of a black dragon. It was the same guy. The mechanic in Sandra's dirty apartment was the missing billionaire. Holy shit, William whispered. A sick, greedy smile spread across his bruised face. William was a loser. He was a gambler, a drunk, and a thief. But he also had a secret his mother had told him on her deathbed. William was the illegitimate son of the famous, ruthless Korean CEO, Julian Kang. Julian Kang was a monster who owned half the real estate in the city. Julian Kang was also the older, legitimate brother of Nathan Kang. The brothers hated each other. They fought a bloody, secret war for control of the family empire. A month ago, Nathan Kang vanished. The streets said Julian finally had him killed, but Julian had sent out secret messages to his underground contacts. Nathan's body was never found. Julian wanted him dead, and he was paying millions to the person who could prove it. And William just found him wearing cheap sweatpants in his ex-girlfriend's apartment. William's hands shook as he dialed a phone number he had stolen from his dead mother's old address book. It was a direct line to Julian Kang's private fixer. He put the phone to his ear and listened to it ring. "Speak," a cold, professional voice answered. "I have information," William said. His throat hurt so bad his voice sounded like a dying frog. "About Nathan Kang." "Who is this?" the voice demanded sharply. "It does not matter who I am," William smiled. "I know where he is. I saw him an hour ago. He is alive, but he looks messed up. I think he lost his memory." The line went dead silent. William could hear the sound of typing in the background. "Where is he?" the fixer asked. The voice was deadly calm now. "I want money," William demanded. "I want $1 million cash. If you agree, I will text you the address. If you try to track me, I will spook him and he will run." $1 million is acceptable," the fixer said smoothly. "If the information is accurate, send the address. If you are lying, we will find you and we will kill you slowly." The phone clicked and went dead. William laughed. It hurt his bruised throat, but he did not care. He typed Sandra's Brooklyn address into a text message and hit send. He was going to be rich. He was going to get his revenge on the bastard who choked him, and he was going to ruin Sandra's stupid little life forever. He picked up his whiskey glass and drained it. The game was on. Back in the tiny apartment in Brooklyn, night had fallen. The storm outside raged on, throwing loud cracks of thunder against the brick building. The single dirty window rattled in its frame. Sandra stood in the small bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. She looked exhausted. The lie was working, but the cost was huge. She had a ruthless, dangerous man pacing around her bedroom like a caged tiger. She turned off the water and dried her face with a thin blue towel. She took a deep breath, opened the bathroom door and walked out. Nathan was sitting on the edge of the mattress. The single light bulb hanging from the ceiling cast harsh shadows across his scarred, tattooed chest. He was holding the heavy silver lighter in his hand, flipping it open and snapping it shut over and over again. Click, snap, click, snap. It was a slow, steady rhythm that set Sandra's teeth on edge. "Come here," Nathan said. He did not look up from the lighter. Sandra hesitated, but she knew she had to play by his rules now. She walked over and stood a few feet away from the bed. "Sit down," he ordered. She slowly sat down next to him on the thin mattress. The bed sank under their combined weight, pulling her slightly closer to his hot, solid thigh. She pulled her knees up to her chest, keeping herself as small as possible. Nathan finally stopped playing with the lighter. He closed his large hand around it and turned his head to look at her. His dark eyes moved over her face in the dim light. "You said we used each other," Nathan said quietly. His voice was a low, rough rumble. "You gave me a place to hide. I gave you a fake husband to stop your parents from selling you to some old man." "Yes," Sandra whispered. "If that is true," Nathan said, leaning slightly closer to her, "why do I feel like I want to break everything in this room when I think about another man touching you?" Sandra's heart stopped. She looked at him completely stunned. Nathan's eyes were pitch black and full of a dark, confusing fire. He reached out and wrapped his thick fingers around her wrist, right where William had grabbed her earlier. His touch was warm, heavy, and completely possessive. "I do not remember you," Nathan said. His thumb slowly stroked the soft skin of her inner wrist. "I do not remember our deal. But when that piece of trash tried to push past me to get to you today, my blood turned to boiling oil. I did not just want to stop him. I wanted to end his life. I wanted to rip his head off for looking at what is mine." Sandra could not breathe. The heat radiating from his hand was spreading up her arm. He was a monster, but right now, he was looking at her like she was the most valuable thing in the world. We are just a cover," Sandra stammered. She tried to pull her hand away, but his grip was like steel. "Maybe we were," Nathan whispered. He pulled her wrist slightly, forcing her to lean closer to him. His face was only inches from hers now. But things change, Sandra. I am stuck in this room. You are the only thing in this world I know right now. If we are playing husband and wife, we are going to play it right. What does that mean? She asked. Her voice shook badly. It means you are mine, he said. He let go of her wrist and moved his hand up to cup her jaw. His fingers slid into the hair at the base of her neck. He tilted her head up. It means no more sleeping on the edge of the bed. It means no more hiding from me. Before Sandra could process the words, Nathan leaned in and pressed his lips against hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was hard, demanding, and full of raw, hungry heat. He took her mouth completely, claiming it like he owned it. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his bare, scarred chest. Sandra gasped against his lips, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until her head spun. She knew she should push him away. She knew he was a dangerous stranger she brought home by mistake. But his mouth was hot, and his hands were strong, and for the first time in her life she felt completely, terrifyingly safe. She raised her hands and pressed them flat against his chest, feeling the hard muscle and the raised edge of his scars. Nathan pulled back just an inch. Both of them were breathing fast. His dark eyes burned into hers. You belong to me now, he growled against her lips. Deal or no deal, do you understand? Sandra stared at him. She was in so deep there was no going back. I understand, she whispered. He kissed her again, pushing her back down onto the mattress. Outside the window, a sleek, expensive black town car pulled to a stop at the end of the street. The rain beat against its tinted windows. Inside the car, Julian Kang's private fixer stared at his cell phone. He looked at the dirty brick building through the rain. We found him, the fixer said into a radio. Get the team ready. We go in tomorrow night. We take the girl and we put a bullet in his head. The grey morning light pushed through the dirty window, but it did not make the room feel any warmer. Sandra woke up slowly. She felt a heavy, hot weight across her stomach. She opened her eyes and saw Nathan's thick arm wrapped tight around her waist. She was pulled flush against his warm, scarred chest. She could hear his deep, even breathing right next to her ear. She did not move. She lay perfectly still, staring at the peeling paint on the wall. The kiss from last night flashed in her brain. It was hard and rough, and it changed everything. She had made a deal with a killer, and now the killer owned her. Nathan shifted. His breathing changed. He did not wake up slow like normal people. His dark eyes snapped open, totally alert. He did not stretch or yawn. He just lifted his head and looked at the locked door. Then he looked down at Sandra. You are awake, he said. His morning voice was a deep, rough gravel. Yes, Sandra whispered. He pulled his arm back and sat up. He grabbed his cheap hoodie from the floor and pulled it over his head. The air in the room was freezing, but he did not seem to care. He walked over to the window and looked down at the wet Brooklyn street. The rain had stopped, leaving behind deep puddles and a nasty grey fog. Someone is out there, Nathan said softly. Sandra sat up fast. She pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. What do you mean, who? There is a dark blue car parked across the street, Nathan said. He did not step away from the glass. He stayed hidden in the shadows of the dirty curtain. It has been sitting there for 10 minutes. No one gets in or out, just exhaust coming from the pipe. It is just a neighbor, Sandra said. She felt a cold drop of sweat slide down her neck. People park on this street all the time. Nathan turned to look at her. His eyes were completely flat. It is not a neighbor. I can feel it in my gut. Someone is watching the building. He walked away from the window and went to the tiny kitchen. He opened the empty drawers one by one. They made loud scraping noises. He opened the cabinet under the sink. He found a rusty hammer and a long, thick metal pipe that used to belong to an old vacuum cleaner. He pulled the pipe out and weighed it in his hand. What are you doing? Sandra asked. Preparing, Nathan said. He looked around the room. Do you have any heavy tape, duct tape? In the box by the door, Sandra pointed. Her hand shook. Nathan walked over and dug through the cardboard box filled with her old art supplies. He found a half-empty roll of silver duct tape. He brought it back to the table. He sat down on the wobbly chair and started wrapping the tape around the bottom of the metal pipe to make a thick, tight grip. The sound of the tape ripping echoed in the quiet room. Rip, rip, rip. Sandra watched his large hands move. He worked fast and perfect. He did not even have to think about it. He was building a weapon to crush someone's skull, and he looked as calm as a man drinking his morning coffee. You think the bad people found us, Sandra whispered. Maybe, Nathan said. He did not look up from the pipe. Maybe it is the guys you borrowed money from. Maybe it is the guys who put me in the hospital. It does not matter. If they come through that door, they die. Sandra felt sick to her stomach. She had lied to him. There were no bad men looking for her money. If someone was outside, it was his enemies. It was the people who wanted the missing billionaire dead. She had pulled their attention right to her front door. I have to go to work, Sandra lied. I have a shift at the diner down the street. She needed to get out of the apartment. She needed to think. She needed to figure out how to stop this train before it crashed. Nathan finally stopped taping the pipe. He looked up. No. What do you mean no? Sandra stood up from the bed. She kept her clothes on. I need money for food. I have to go to work. You are not leaving this room, Nathan said. His voice was cold iron. Not while that car is sitting out there. You stay here with me. You cannot keep me locked up in here, Sandra yelled. The fear made her voice loud. Nathan stood up. He walked over to her in 2 long strides. He stopped right in front of her, towering over her small frame. I said you stay here. If they are watching the building, they will wait for you to leave. They will grab you and use you to get to me. You belong to me, Sandra. You stay where I can see you. Sandra opened her mouth to fight back, but the look in his black eyes shut her up. It was the same look he had right before he kissed her last night. Hungry, dark, and totally possessive. She swallowed hard and nodded. Good, Nathan said. He reached out and grabbed a thick piece of her messy hair, rubbing it between his fingers. Go make coffee. We are going to have a long day. Down on the wet street, William sat behind the wheel of his beat-up blue car. He rubbed his sore neck. The bruises were turning an ugly shade of dark purple. He took a sip of his cold, bitter coffee and spit it out the open window. He hated this neighborhood. He hated Sandra. And he really hated the giant bastard living in her apartment. His cheap phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He picked it up fast. It was an unknown number. He swiped the screen and put the phone to his ear. Yeah, William asked. His voice still sounded like broken glass. The team is moving into position, the cold voice of the fixer said. They will be there tonight. When it gets fully dark, you need to leave the area. If they see you, they will drop you too. I am not leaving, William growled. I want to watch. I want to see you drag that big piece of shit out of there in a bag. You are a stupid man, the fixer said. But do what you want. Stay out of the way. If you mess up the hit, your reward money goes to 0. The line clicked off. William threw the phone onto the seat. He smiled, a nasty, greedy smile, $1 million. He was going to be a millionaire by midnight. He leaned back in his dirty seat and stared up at Sandra's window. He could not wait to see the fear on her face when the hitman kicked her door in. She always thought she was so smart. She always thought she was better than him. She was going to die in that dirty room, and William was going to get paid for it. Inside the apartment, the hours dragged on like thick mud. Sandra sat on the floor in her art corner. She tried to mix paints on her wooden board, but she kept dropping her brush. Every little noise in the hallway made her jump. Every car driving by outside made her breath stop. Nathan paced the room. He walked back and forth like a wild animal in a cage. He held the heavy metal pipe in his hand. He checked the locks on the door 3 times. He stood by the side of the window and looked through the tiny crack in the curtain. The car is still there, Nathan said softly. It was 4 in the afternoon. The sky outside was already starting to turn a dark, ugly grey. Another storm was rolling in. It has not moved for 6 hours. Maybe it broke down, Sandra said. She knew it was a stupid thing to say, but she needed him to calm down. His pacing was making her crazy. Nathan looked at her. Cars that break down do not have men sitting inside them smoking cigarettes all day. He is waiting for something or someone. Nathan walked away from the window. He went to the kitchen and grabbed one of the heavy wooden kitchen chairs. He dragged it over to the front door. He jammed the top of the chair right under the doorknob, kicking the bottom legs tight against the floor. It was a cheap way to block the door, but it would slow anyone down who tried to kick it open. What are you doing? Sandra asked, her voice cracked. I am making sure you do not die tonight, Nathan said flatly. He turned around and walked over to her. He grabbed her arm and pulled her up from the floor. He dragged her toward the tiny bathroom. Get in there. No, Sandra fought back, pulling her arm away. I am not hiding in the bathroom. Get in the damn bathroom, Sandra, Nathan ordered. His voice was low, but it shook the walls. If they come through that door, the first thing they will do is shoot whoever is standing in the open. The bathroom has no windows. The walls are thick. You stay in the tub. You do not come out until I tell you to. Nathan, please, Sandra begged. The reality of the situation was hitting her hard. She was going to get killed because of a lie she told to pay her rent. You do not even know who is out there. You have no memory. I do not need my memory to know how to kill a man, Nathan said. He looked down at the metal pipe in his hand. My body remembers, my hands remember, I can feel it. He grabbed her arm again and pushed her into the small, dark bathroom. He turned on the little light switch. The yellow bulb buzzed above the mirror. Sit in the tub, he said. Keep your head down. Sandra stepped backward until she hit the cold porcelain tub. She sat down, pulling her knees up to her chest just like she did the night before. She looked up at him standing in the doorway. He looked like a giant shadow blocking out the rest of the world. Nathan, she whispered. Her throat felt tight. Be careful. Nathan stared at her for a long, heavy second. His dark eyes softened just a tiny bit. He walked into the bathroom and crouched down in front of the tub. He reached out and grabbed the back of her neck. He pulled her forward and pressed a hard, fast kiss to her lips. I will handle this, wife, he growled against her mouth. Just stay quiet. He stood up and walked out of the bathroom. He did not close the door all the way. He left it open just a crack so he could hear her. Sandra sat in the cold tub. She pulled her sweater tight around her body. She could hear the rain start to fall outside again. It hit the roof in loud, heavy drops. The thunder rolled in the distance. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The silence in the apartment was worse than screaming. Sandra could hear her own heart beating in her ears. Thump, thump, thump. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the building. It sounded like the heavy wooden door at the bottom of the stairs had been kicked open. Sandra covered her mouth with her hands. She squeezed her eyes shut. Heavy, fast footsteps stomped up the wooden stairs. It was not just one person. It sounded like 4 or 5 large men running up the steps. They did not care about being quiet. They were coming fast and they were coming hard. The footsteps stopped right outside Sandra's apartment door. Sandra held her breath. She waited for a knock. She waited for a voice. Instead, a massive explosion of sound tore through the room. Someone kicked the front door with incredible force. The wood cracked and split. The door flew inward, hitting the wooden chair Nathan had jammed under the knob. The chair snapped in half with a loud crunch, throwing pieces of wood across the kitchen floor. Get in, go, 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 a rough voice shouted in the hallway. 3 men in dark clothes rushed into the apartment. They held thick black guns in their hands. They moved fast, sweeping the room. Clear the kitchen, one of them yelled. Sandra stayed completely flat in the bathtub. She pushed herself as far back against the cold wall as she could go. She was shaking so bad her teeth clicked together. She heard the men moving closer to the bedroom area. Then she heard a sickening, heavy thud. A man screamed in pain. A loud crunch echoed through the room, like a baseball bat hitting a watermelon. He is on the left, another man yelled. 2 loud gunshots fired inside the small room. The sound was deafening. It made Sandra's ears ring. The smell of burning gunpowder filled the apartment instantly. Sandra heard bodies hitting the floor. She heard men grunting and cursing. She heard the wet, heavy sound of Nathan swinging the metal pipe. He moved like a demon in the dark. He did not yell. He did not talk. He just destroyed everything in his path. Put him down, shoot him, the leader of the hit squad yelled. His voice sounded panicked now. Another gunshot went off, then the sound of glass shattering. Someone fell backwards into the cheap wooden table, breaking it to pieces. Fucked, a man screamed. My arm, he broke my arm. Sandra crawled toward the edge of the bathtub. She peered through the small crack in the open bathroom door. The apartment was dark, but the flash of lightning outside lit up the room for a split second. She saw Nathan. He had one hand wrapped around a man's throat, holding him completely off the floor. His other hand held the metal pipe. He swung the pipe down hard, smashing it into the side of the man's knee. The bones snapped loudly. The man let out a wet, dying gasp before Nathan threw him into the wall like a rag doll. There was only one hitman left standing. He backed away, pointing his gun right at Nathan's chest. The hitman's hands were shaking. He pulled the trigger. Click. The gun was empty. Nathan stepped forward into the dim light. His grey hoodie was covered in dark, wet blood. His face was completely blank. He looked like a machine built for nothing but violence. Who sent you? Nathan asked. His deep voice cut through the ringing silence of the room. The hitman dropped the empty gun. He put his hands up. Please, man, it was just a job, we got tipped off. Who gave you the tip? Nathan stepped closer. He raised the bloody metal pipe. A guy named William, the hitman yelled, his voice cracking with pure fear. A guy in a blue car outside, he called it in, just let me walk away. Nathan did not hesitate. He swung the pipe across the man's face. The hitman dropped to the floor, completely unconscious. The apartment went dead quiet again. The three men on the floor did not move. Blood pooled on the sticky kitchen linoleum. Nathan dropped the bent metal pipe. It hit the floor with a loud clang. He wiped his bloody hands on his sweatpants. He walked over to the bathroom door and pulled it open. Sandra was sitting in the tub, staring up at him with wide, terrified eyes. She was looking at a monster, a man who just took out 3 armed killers with a piece of scrap metal. Nathan reached down and grabbed her arm. He pulled her up onto her feet. His hands were hot and sticky with blood. Are you hurt? He asked. His voice was rough and breathless. No, Sandra choked out. No, I am okay. Good, Nathan said. He pulled her out of the bathroom and into the ruined apartment. Pack a bag, fast, we cannot stay here. Where are we going? Sandra asked. She looked at the bodies on her floor. She felt like she was going to throw up. I do not know yet, Nathan said. He walked over to the broken front door and looked out into the dark hallway. But first, we are going to have a little chat with a man named William. Sandra's blood turned to ice. William, he had sold them out. Get your stuff, Nathan ordered, turning back to her. His dark eyes locked onto hers, full of a terrifying, deadly promise. The deal just got complicated. Sandra ran to her small closet. She grabbed a faded black duffel bag from the top shelf and threw it on the mattress. Her hands were shaking so bad she could barely work the zipper. She shoved in 2 pairs of jeans, a few plain shirts, clean underwear, and a heavy sweater. She grabbed her toothbrush and her cheap phone charger. She did not have much to take. Her whole life fit into one small bag. While she packed, Nathan moved around the ruined kitchen. He did not look like a man who just survived a massive fight. He looked completely calm. He crouched down next to the hitman with the broken knee. The man was groaning, his eyes rolling back in his head. Nathan ignored the sound. He reached into the man's heavy black jacket and pulled out a thick handgun. He checked the bullets, slammed the magazine back in, and shoved the gun into the waistband of his cheap sweatpants. Then he moved to the leader, the one he had knocked out with the metal pipe. Nathan pulled the leader's dark winter coat off his limp body. The coat was thick and warm. Nathan put it on over his bloody grey hoodie. It fit perfectly across his wide shoulders. He searched the dead man's pockets and found a wad of cash wrapped in a rubber band and a set of car keys. He shoved them into his new coat. I am ready, Sandra whispered. She stood by the bed, holding the straps of her bag tight. We are going out the back, Nathan said. He walked past the broken front door. He did not even look out into the hallway. The front stairs are too loud. If they have a lookout, he will be watching the main door. He walked to the single window in the kitchen. He unlocked it and pushed it up. A blast of freezing, wet air hit Sandra in the face. The rain was falling hard now, turning the Brooklyn alleyway below into a dark, muddy river. Nathan climbed out first. He stepped onto the rusty metal fire escape. It groaned loudly under his heavy weight. He turned around and reached his large hand through the window. Give me the bag, then climb out. Sandra handed him the black duffel. She swung one leg over the window sill, then the other. Her worn-out sneakers slipped on the wet metal grating. She almost fell backward, but Nathan caught her arm. His grip was tight and strong. He pulled her flat against the cold brick wall of the building. Keep quiet, he ordered in a low whisper. Follow right behind me. They went down the metal stairs. The rain soaked through Sandra's thin sweater instantly. Her hair plastered to her cheeks. She was freezing, but she did not complain. She just watched Nathan's broad back as he moved silently down the steps. He did not make a single sound. He moved through the dark storm like he belonged in it. When they hit the bottom, Nathan dropped lightly into the muddy alley. He reached up and grabbed Sandra by the waist, lifting her down from the last step so she did not have to jump. He put her down softly. The blue car, Nathan whispered, leaning close to her ear. The rain washed the blood off his hands, leaving them clean and cold. Where is it parked? Right out front, Sandra whispered back. Her teeth were chattering. Across the street from the front door. Good, Nathan said. He pulled the stolen gun from his waistband. You wait here behind this dumpster. Do not move until I come get you. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice cracking. I am going to ask William some questions, Nathan said flatly. He turned away and melted into the dark alley. Sandra crouched behind a huge, smelly green dumpster. She squeezed her eyes shut and pulled her knees to her chest. She was so cold. She hated William. She hated him for breaking her heart, and she hated him for stealing her money, but she did not want to watch him die. Out on the street, William was sitting in his beat-up blue car. The engine was running to keep the heater on. He had his seat laid back, smoking a cheap cigarette. He cracked the driver's side window just an inch to let the smoke out. He stared at the front door of Sandra's apartment building. It was taking too long. The hit squad should have been out by now. William tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. Maybe the giant put up a good fight. Maybe he killed one of them. William smiled. He did not care. As long as the giant ended up dead, William was going to get his $1 million. He took a long drag of his cigarette and blew the smoke toward the cracked window. Suddenly, a massive shadow blocked the orange light from the street lamp. William did not even have time to turn his head. Thick, heavy fingers shoved into the small crack of the window. The fingers grabbed the top of the glass. With one loud, violent pull, the entire car window shattered. Pieces of glass sprayed all over William's face and chest. "Holy shit," William screamed, throwing his hands up. A large hand shot through the broken window and grabbed William by the throat. The grip was exactly like the one that almost killed him yesterday. It cut off his air instantly. Nathan dragged William sideways. He pulled the smaller man halfway out of the broken window. The jagged pieces of glass cut into William's leather jacket and scratched his stomach, but Nathan did not stop pulling. He threw William out of the car and onto the wet, hard street. William hit the pavement hard. He gasped for air, spitting up rainwater. He tried to scramble backward, but a heavy boot slammed down on his chest, pinning him flat against the road. Nathan stood over him. The rain poured down over his dark, cold face. He raised the black gun and pointed it directly between William's eyes. "Please," William cried. He threw his hands up to cover his face. "Please, man, do not shoot." "You sent them," Nathan said. His voice was completely calm. It was not angry. It was just an empty, dead fact. "You sent men to kill me." "I did not have a choice," William sobbed. He was a complete coward. He pissed his pants the second he saw the gun. "They pay a lot of money. It was just business." "Who pays?" Nathan asked. He pressed the cold metal barrel of the gun right against William's forehead. "Give me a name right now." "Your brother," William screamed. The words tore out of his throat. He did not care about the reward money anymore. He just wanted to live. Julian Kang, he runs the whole damn city. He put a bounty on your head." Nathan froze. Julian Kang. The name hit his brain like a spark landing on dry wood. It did not bring back a perfect picture, but it brought back a feeling. A deep, heavy, violent feeling of pure hatred. He knew that name. He knew the man who carried it. "Who am I?" Nathan whispered. He pushed the gun harder into William's skin. "Tell me my name." William stared up at him in complete shock. "Are you crazy? You are Nathan Kang. You are a billionaire. You own the other half of the companies. You and Julian went to war. He wanted you dead so he could take it all. That is why you were hiding." From the dark edge of the alley, Sandra heard everything. She stood frozen behind the brick wall. Her stomach dropped so fast she thought she was going to throw up. A billionaire. Nathan Kang. He was not a mechanic. He was not just some street thug who got into a bad fight. He was one of the richest, most dangerous men in the city. He owned skyscrapers. He owned banks. And Julian Kang, the man trying to kill him, was a monster that everyone in New York feared. The news was always talking about Julian Kang. He was untouchable. Sandra put her hands over her mouth. She had bought a billionaire from a dirty hospital worker for $3,000. If Julian Kang found out she had hidden his brother, he would burn her alive. If Nathan found out she had faked their entire deal, he would shoot her right now. "Where is your phone?" Nathan asked William. In the car," William stuttered. "On the seat." Nathan did not move his boot. He reached into the broken window of the car and grabbed the cheap cell phone. He looked at the screen. It was unlocked. He opened the text messages and saw the unknown number. He saw the message giving away Sandra's address. "You sold my location for $1 million, Nathan said. He dropped the phone onto the wet street. He raised his heavy boot and stomped on the phone, crushing it into pieces of plastic and glass. "I am sorry," William begged, tears mixed with the rain on his bruised face. I am so sorry, just take the car, take the keys, let me go. Nathan looked down at him. He pulled the gun away from William's head. William let out a massive sigh of relief. He thought he was going to live. Nathan flipped the gun around in his hand. He gripped the hot barrel and swung the heavy metal handle down fast. He smashed the bottom of the gun right into the side of William's head. A loud crack echoed in the street. William's eyes rolled back and his head hit the wet pavement. He was out completely cold. Nathan put the gun back into his coat pocket. He turned his head and looked toward the dark alley. Sandra, he said loudly, come here. Sandra stepped out from behind the brick wall. She walked slowly toward the car. She carried her black bag tight against her chest. She looked at William lying on the ground, then looked up at Nathan. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. She knew he was going to ask her about the deal. She had to be ready. Nathan stared at her. The rain dripped off his dark hair. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the car keys he took from the dead hitman. Get in the car, Nathan ordered. Sandra walked around the front of the blue car. She opened the passenger door and got inside. The seats were torn and smelled like stale smoke, but it was warm. Nathan dragged William's limp body out of the street and tossed him onto the dirty sidewalk next to a pile of garbage bags. Then he got into the driver's seat and slammed the door. He put the key in the ignition and turned it. The old engine coughed, then roared to life. He threw the car into drive and pulled away from the curb, leaving the apartment building and the dead hitman far behind. They drove in total silence for 10 minutes. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. He drove fast but smooth. He checked the rearview mirror every few seconds to make sure no one was following them. Sandra sat completely stiff. She watched his strong hands grip the steering wheel. He was processing everything. He was a billionaire, a king, and she had told him he was a poor mechanic hiding in a Brooklyn dump. Nathan finally spoke. He did not look at her. You said we had a deal, Nathan said. His deep voice filled the small car. You said I was a mechanic. You said I had no family. You said I paid your rent to hide me from some bad men. Sandra took a sharp breath. Here it was, the lie had to hold or she was dead. I told you what you told me, Sandra said. She forced her voice to sound tired and angry. She looked out the side window at the passing city lights. You think you told me the truth when you showed up bleeding in my alley a year ago. You think you said, "Hi, I am Nathan Kang, a billionaire running from my evil brother." No, you lied to me. Nathan glanced at her. He studied the side of her face. You told me you fixed cars, Sandra kept going. She turned to look at him, pushing her fear down deep. You gave me a fake name. You paid me cash. I did not ask questions because I needed the money to get my parents off my back. I did not know you owned half the damn city. If I knew Julian Kang was looking for you, I would have never let you in my apartment. I would have run the other way. The lie was beautiful. It matched his memory of the fake ID in the hospital. It matched the cash. It made him the liar, not her. Nathan stared at the wet road. His jaw worked back and forth. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. The story made perfect sense to him. A smart man running from Julian Kang would never use his real name. A smart man would find a poor, desperate girl and pay her to be a cover. He would hide in a dump where no one would ever look for a billionaire. You did not know, Nathan said softly. It was a statement, not a question. No, Sandra said. She let out a fake, shaky breath. I thought you were just a low-level thug. Now there are dead bodies in my kitchen. Now I cannot ever go home. You ruined my life. Nathan hit the brakes hard. The car slid slightly on the wet street before coming to a complete stop by the side of an empty, dark park. He put the car in park and turned to face her fully. He leaned across the middle console. He was huge in the small space of the car. He reached out and cupped her face with his large hand. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. I did not ruin your life, Nathan whispered. His dark eyes were burning with that same intense, possessive fire from the apartment. I am going to give you a new one. Sandra stared at him. What? My brother tried to kill me, Nathan said. His voice was low and deadly. He took my memory. He sent men to shoot up my safe house. He is going to pay for that. I am going to take back everything that belongs to me, every building, every dollar. He leaned closer until his nose almost brushed hers. And you are coming with me, he said. I am just a cover, Sandra whispered. Her heart was doing backflips. You do not need a cover anymore, you know who you are. I said you belong to me, Nathan growled. His thumb pressed lightly against her bottom lip. You hid me. You took care of me in that hospital when I was nothing. You kept the deal going. You are not just a cover anymore, Sandra. You are my wife, and Julian is going to learn exactly what happens when someone touches what is mine." Sandra could not speak. The billionaire mob boss was claiming her. He thought she was loyal. He thought she had saved him out of honor and their business deal. He had no idea she was a fraud who bought him from a thief. If he took back his empire, she would have everything: money, power, safety from her awful parents and Mr. Henderson. But if he ever found out the truth, he would destroy her. "We need a place to sleep tonight," Nathan said, pulling back slightly. He put the car into gear. "Somewhere Julian cannot find us. Tomorrow I start making phone calls. Tomorrow I get my empire back." Sandra nodded slowly. She looked straight ahead at the dark, rainy road. She had built a monster out of lies, and now the monster was taking her to war. Sandra lay awake for a long time. The cheap mattress felt hard under her back. The air in the room was stale and heavy. Every time a car drove past on the highway, the headlights cast fast, moving shadows across the dirty ceiling. Nathan's steady heartbeat thumped against her back. He was completely asleep, his body totally relaxed. He did not toss or turn. He just held her locked in his strong grip like she was his favorite prize. Sandra carefully reached her hand up to her mouth. Her lips still felt slightly bruised from his kiss. The heat of it was still sitting in her chest. It confused her. It terrified her. She was a poor artist who painted city scenes to make rent. Now she was playing a twisted game of house with a man who could buy her building with pocket change and kill a man with his bare hands. She finally fell asleep sometime before dawn. When she woke up, the motel room was filled with thin, grey daylight. Sandra blinked and looked around. The bed beside her was empty. Panic hit her chest like a hammer. She sat up fast. The thin yellow blanket fell to her waist. "Nathan," she called out. Her voice was scratchy. The bathroom door opened. Nathan stepped out. He had put the bloody grey hoodie back on. He was holding a small white towel, wiping water off his face. His dark hair was slicked back, totally wet. "I am here," he said smoothly. He tossed the towel onto the small chair in the corner. "Get dressed, we need to leave." Sandra scrambled out of the bed. She pulled her jeans back on and quickly put on her sneakers. "Where are we going?" "I need a phone," Nathan said. He walked over to the bed and grabbed the thick black gun from under his pillow. He checked the clip, slammed it back in and shoved the gun into the waistband of his sweatpants. He pulled the hoodie down to cover it. "And I need cash, real cash, not just the trash I took off that dead hitman." "You said you do not remember your bank accounts," Sandra said. She grabbed her black duffel bag from the floor. "I don't," Nathan said. He walked over to the table and picked up the black key card with the gold chip. He held it up to the light. "But I remember what this is. I woke up at 4 in the morning and it was just sitting in my head." Sandra stopped moving. Her heart skipped a beat. "You got your memory back." "No," Nathan growled. He sounded angry about it. "My brain is still a black hole. I do not remember my childhood. I do not remember the war with my brother. I do not even remember the deal we made in your alley. But when I looked at this card in the dark, my hands remembered it. It is a secure access card for a private vault. A vault that does not ask questions." Sandra swallowed hard. "Where is the vault?" "Manhattan," Nathan said. He walked to the door and pulled the heavy deadbolt back. "Let's go." They walked out into the cold morning air. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a nasty, dark grey. The parking lot was empty except for William's beat-up blue car. Nathan opened the driver's door and got in. Sandra climbed into the passenger seat. She threw her bag in the back. The car smelled even more like old smoke and wet dog today. Nathan started the engine. It sputtered, coughed, and finally roared. He threw it into drive and peeled out of the parking lot, hitting the highway ramp fast. "We have to dump this car," Nathan said, staring at the road. "If William woke up, he probably called the cops, or he called Julian. They will be looking for this plate." "How are we going to get to Manhattan without a car?" Sandra asked. She gripped the edge of her seat. He was driving way over the speed limit. "We steal one," Nathan said flatly. Sandra stared at him. She opened her mouth to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. He was not asking for her permission. He was totally focused. He was sliding back into his old life, the life of a ruthless boss who took exactly what he wanted. They drove for 20 minutes. Nathan got off the highway in a busy town just outside the city. He pulled into a huge shopping mall parking lot. The lot was packed with morning shoppers. Nathan parked the blue car near the back, far away from the main doors. He turned the engine off. "Leave the bag," he ordered. Sandra dropped the black duffel bag on the floorboard. She followed him out of the car. They walked through the parking lot. Nathan kept his head down, the hood pulled up to hide his face. Sandra walked fast to keep up with his long strides. He stopped near a row of expensive cars. He looked around. No one was close by. He walked right up to a sleek dark grey Audi. It looked brand new. "Turn around," Nathan told Sandra. "Watch the row." Sandra spun around. Her hands were shaking. She felt like everyone was looking at them, but the few people walking by were just staring at their phones. She heard a loud, sharp crack behind her. She looked over her shoulder. Nathan had used his elbow to smash the driver's side window. The glass spiderwebbed, and he pushed his hand right through the middle, popping the lock. He opened the door, reached under the steering wheel, and ripped a plastic panel off. "What are you doing?" Sandra panicked. "You are going to trigger the alarm." "I already killed the alarm wire," Nathan grunted. He pulled 2 thick wires out of the dash. He stripped the plastic off the ends with his teeth, twisting the bare metal together. The Audi's engine roared to life perfectly. It was smooth and quiet. Nathan threw the broken pieces of plastic onto the floor. "Get in." Sandra ran to the passenger side and got in. The leather seats were soft and smelled like expensive cologne. Nathan threw the car into reverse and backed out fast. He drove toward the exit, merging into traffic before anyone even noticed the broken window. Sandra sat back in the fancy seat. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it would break her ribs. She had just helped steal a $50,000 car. She was a criminal now. "You did that fast," Sandra whispered. "My hands remember," Nathan said. He did not look happy about it. He looked pissed off. "A billionaire does not hotwire cars in a mall parking lot. I learned that on the street. I learned that before the money." He looked at her out of the corner of his eye. "You said I was a mechanic. I bet I was stealing cars before I was fixing them." Sandra nodded slowly. The lies were building on top of each other, making a bridge she had to walk across. "You told me you had a rough past. You said you did bad things to survive." "I did," Nathan said quietly, his jaw clenched. "And Julian is going to find out I still know how to do them." They drove over the bridge into Manhattan. The city was loud, crowded, and busy. Nathan drove the stolen Audi like an expert, weaving through the heavy traffic without hitting the brakes. He drove downtown, heading toward the financial district. The buildings grew taller, blocking out the grey sky. He pulled into a dark, underground parking garage beneath a massive glass tower. He took a ticket from the machine and drove down 3 levels to the bottom floor. He parked in a dark corner next to a concrete pillar. He turned the engine off. The garage was perfectly quiet. "Stay close," Nathan said. He pulled the gun from his waistband and tucked it into the pocket of his heavy coat. He patted the pocket to make sure it was hidden. Sandra followed him out of the car. They walked to an elevator bank in the corner of the garage. Nathan pressed the button for the lobby. When the doors opened, Sandra gasped. The lobby was breathtaking. The floors were shining white marble. The walls were covered in dark wood and gold trim. Men and women in expensive suits walked around, looking busy and important. 2 massive security guards stood by the front desk. Sandra looked down at her dirty sneakers and worn-out jeans. She felt completely out of place. Nathan did not care. He walked straight through the lobby. He carried himself like he owned the entire building. His chest was puffed out, his shoulders broad. He walked with a smooth, dangerous grace that made people step out of his way instinctively. He walked past the main desk and headed down a quiet, narrow hallway. At the end of the hall was a thick steel door with no handle. Next to the door was a black keypad. A tall man in a sharp black suit stood next to the door. He crossed his arms and glared at Nathan. "Sir, this area is restricted. You cannot be back here." Nathan stopped. He looked the man up and down. He did not speak. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out the black key card and held it up. The security guard looked at the gold chip on the card. The angry look fell off his face instantly. His eyes went wide. He quickly stepped back and bowed his head slightly. "My apologies, sir," the guard said, his voice totally different now. "Please proceed." Nathan did not acknowledge the apology. He just stepped forward and tapped the black card against the keypad. The pad beeped a high-pitched green tone. The heavy steel door clicked and popped open an inch. Nathan pushed the door open and grabbed Sandra's arm, pulling her inside with him. The door shut heavy behind them, cutting off all the noise from the lobby. They were in a small, windowless room. The walls were made of grey concrete. The only thing in the room was a long row of shiny steel safety deposit boxes covering the entire back wall. "The card," Nathan said softly to himself. "It is a master key." He walked down the row of boxes. He looked at the tiny numbers etched into the steel. He stopped in front of box number 808. He took a deep breath. He held the black card up to a small scanner next to the box lock. The scanner beeped. The steel door of the box popped open. Sandra held her breath. She took a step closer, trying to look inside. Nathan reached his massive hand into the dark box. He pulled out a thick, heavy black leather bag. He unzipped the top and looked inside. Sandra let out a tiny gasp. The bag was stuffed full of $100 bills. There were stacks and stacks of them, wrapped in tight paper bands. There had to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. But that was not all. Nathan reached his hand deeper into the bag. He pulled out a thick stack of passports. The books were dark blue, red, and green. They were from all over the world. He flipped the top passport open. Sandra looked over his shoulder. The picture was definitely Nathan, looking clean and perfect in a sharp suit. But the name printed next to the picture was not Nathan Kang. The name printed was Alexander Vance. "Fake papers," Nathan muttered. He flipped to the next passport. The picture was the same, but the name was Marcus Thorne. He dropped the passports back into the leather bag. He pulled out a small, flat black box. He popped the lid open. Inside was an untraceable satellite phone, a burner phone that could not be hacked by the police or his brother. Nathan zipped the heavy leather bag shut. He grabbed the handle and lifted it effortlessly. He looked at Sandra. His dark eyes were burning with a new kind of energy. "I do not know what I did before the hospital," Nathan said, his rough voice echoing in the concrete room. "I do not know why I needed a fake life with a poor artist in Brooklyn, but I know I am not a victim. I did not get caught. I went off the grid on purpose." Sandra felt a cold chill run down her spine. "Why?" "Because Julian thought he won," Nathan said. A cold, violent smile touched his lips. "He thought he killed me. He thought he took the empire. But I hid the money, I hid the papers. I was planning to come back from the dead." He stepped close to her. He raised his free hand and ran his thumb over her bottom lip. The touch was soft, but the look in his eyes was totally dangerous. "You helped me hide, Sandra," he whispered. "You kept the deal going while I was blind. You proved your loyalty. Now you get the reward." "What reward?" Sandra asked, her voice shaking. "We are going to buy an army," Nathan growled. "We are going to find the men who are loyal to me, and then we are going to go to Julian's penthouse, and I am going to put a bullet between his eyes."